The Dot Hack series has been a series that I've always loved in passing. Its history with me has always been so on and off that it's always been hard to tell if I was a fan or not. My first real exposure to Dot Hack was Dot Hack Sign, which served as a prequel to the game series that came out. And in it, you had Tsukasa, who was this kid who was trapped within this virtual world but just seemed to meander from place to place, not really interested in doing anything that a game would involve, which would seem weird, but I was deeply fascinated when I was younger. It was just so strange and bizarre. I was captivated by the atmosphere of the world that they were in. It was a game, but it didn't feel like a game because of the way that Tsukasa was. Watching it later on in life, it became clear that this was because Tsukasa was going through a lot in their life. They had challenges that they were just trying to escape from. Not really interested in battles or anything like that, but it was just that Tsukasa was trying to escape. And what better escape is there than a video game that lets you do whatever you want? Why not be lost in a video game if it lets you escape from the terrible nature of your everyday life? Well, Dot Hack Sign is seen as a classic amongst a lot of old otaku and the like. It has kind of fallen into obscurity nowadays. And honestly, I can't say I'm surprised. It wasn't a bad series, it was just an interesting one. When it came to the games, my interest in that mostly just came from the commercials. I never was actually able to get my hands on a game. No, scratch that. I was. I remember I rented it from Blockbuster way back when. And when I tried to play it, I was so confused. I just didn't have the mindset for RPGs that I do nowadays. And when I remember watching the commercials, I thought it was truly an online experience, only to find out no, it's an RPG. There's an actual storyline here. And it would be years later that I actually watched the cutscenes and the like on YouTube, watched some of the gameplay. I honestly would have loved to have played this. I would love a remaster of this series with updated graphics and the like. But, to my dismay, nothing has come as of yet. I hate that a series that seems so fascinating and so interesting has honestly just become one of another in a genre. It's truly unfortunate. In the background of the the game series was a short-lived anime, Dot Hack Liminality. It was fascinating because it told of what was going on behind the scenes, the people who were working with our heroes in game to try to actually save everyone who was trapped. I remember being very confused the first time I watched this series, and it was only when I was older and could actually tell where things were being placed within the game that it made a lot more sense. And unfortunately, it decreased my interest in this series. It wasn't bad, by no means. It was just that you didn't really need it ultimately. It was just nice flavor text. Later on, I would end up reading The Legend of the Twilight manga. And honestly, that's actually kind of bizarre once I think about it. Because this manga was released in my library at the time. Way back when it was first released in the US, I remember picking up the first volume. I hadn't gotten around to watching the anime for this series, but I remember reading the first volume and being deeply intrigued with it. It would only be later down the line that I found out the significance of the manga itself and fully read it, finding out that it had more connections with the main story of the original games and all that. There was also Dot Hack Gift, which was just kinda silly. But the Legend of the Twilight anime, now that was bizarre to me because while it seemed to link up with the original dot hack sign, at least I thought it did at first, there were too many discrepancies. Things just didn't line up, and it felt very bizarre. And especially once I had gone back and read through the dot hack Legend of the Twilight manga, that I realized the significance of the differences. The anime didn't seem to be canon to the overall dot hack timeline, but the manga deeply seemed to connect. And things later down the line actually seemed to prove that hypothesis that I kept in mind. Why there was such a departure in this series, I'll never know. If you have any clue to this, I'd deeply be interested in knowing. I did my research back in the day, several years ago, and could find nothing as to why there was such a discrepancy. And I'd deeply be interested in knowing why the anime ended up not really being like the manga. Which one was in development first, as they seemed to be released around the same time? And that ultimately ended up being what weakened the Legend of the Twilight anime. It just didn't feel significant enough to actually warrant a second look, even though I did give it one later down the line. Then I ended up coming upon Dot Hack AI Buster, which seemed to proceed, no, proceed the events of everything within Dot Hack. There was this through line that seemed to help develop into the overall story. Honestly, I don't remember it nowadays too much, which I guess speaks to how much interest I actually had within this series. But I remember actually being intrigued because so many things within Dot Hack AI Buster actually ended up showing up later down the line in other series, especially when it came to AI Buster 2, which had a lot of significance, especially in regards to Legend of the Twilight and the Black Rose novel, and so on and so forth. So much within AI Buster 2 really just added a lot more to the overall story of Dot Hack, especially since AI Buster 2 was an anthology series. But my all-time favorite novel of the Dot Hack series was Dot Hack Another Birth, which told the story of the Dot Hack games from the perspective of the character of Black Rose, what she was going through, her connection with the lead characters of Legend of the Twilight, and just how much she was going through. Because ultimately, the main character of the games, Kite I believe it was, had an interesting storyline, but when you get down to it, it was the character of Black Rose who really had something going on towards the end. Kite was an incredible character, but the character of Black Rose really and truly grew on me through this novel, and I fell in love with her character, her story, her struggle, and her overall perspective. I honestly would love to see this adapted into an anime, but I know that will probably never be the case. Ultimately, that timeline of events would kind of be pushed to the background, and we would be overtaken by Dot Hack GU, a series of games that actually ended up being incredibly popular when it first came out. GU was a juggernaut in terms of gameplay, and it was especially helped by the anime Dot Hack Roots, which told the events that happened before the events of Dot Hack GU. I actually ended up watching Dot Hack Roots before I ever even went through the game of GU, and honestly, I was weaker for it. While Roots wasn't a bad anime by any means, GU was the real meat and potatoes of this whole timeline of the series, and it's a shame that I never got around to playing it when I did. You had Dot Hack four X's, which kind of told an alternate story to the original Dot Hack trilogy of games. It was interesting, it was fun, but ultimately it ended up being a little too short for my taste. You then got Dot Hack GU Returner, which served almost like an epilogue to the Dot Hack GU games. And when I finally got around to watching this, as I had gone through the entire Dot Hack GU series, from the anime roots to the games to this, it honestly helped to kind of close things off for a lot of our characters. And it was a nice way of just going out. But you could see the decrease in interest in the Dot Hack series as a whole with Dot Hack Quantum, a brief movie that was alright. It wasn't terrible, but it didn't really do anything to really help the series. It was just kind of there, and honestly, my memories on it are very hazy. But what my memories I wish had actually been in my memories around that time was Dot Hack Link, a game for the PSP that was this absolute collaboration of all things Dot Hack, a celebration, if you will. And honestly, I wish it had been released in the US. When I found out about this game, I felt robbed that we never received this in the US, as it included things that just ended up being what solidified my thought that the to Legend of the Twilight manga was in canon, whereas the anime wasn't, because things from the manga ended up being included in this game. Things from all over, from the Black Rose side novel to events in AI Buster being referenced, characters and the like. It had it all. And I really do feel that the fact that this was never released in the US really just showed that Dot Hack's time was really done. And what should have been a revitalization and a celebration of the series in the Dot Hack the movie ended up not even so much as being that. It was just a thing that happened once again. It was interesting, but it was released to no real fanfare. It even had a game that was released alongside it in Dot Hack Versus, a fighting game where you got to play as the various different Dot Hack characters. But, nothing. It was released, it was there, it was gone. Dot Hack's life had just kind of petered out by this point. The last in the Dot Hack series was Dot Hack GU Last Recode, which was a game that was released as the anthology of all the games up until this point. It even included an extra volume, a little extra gameplay. Released in 2017, it was the last hurrah of the most popular part of the Dot Hack franchise, and even gave a little bit of an epilogue all its own to the GU series as a whole. With remastered graphics, it did fairly well, but still, it wasn't enough. And now Dot Hack is just kind of almost lost to the annals of history. Nothing in what has been almost 5 years now. It's a shame. It really is that such a series that was such a juggernaut in the mid 2000s, the early 2000s, if nothing else, ended up just ultimately just being a memory. But it was a good memory. It was a fun time. And while I haven't completely caught up with the more recent, quote unquote, recent releases, I still think back on this series. A series about a lonely kid who was just meandering around in a game. A game that, when I first picked up, I meandered around because I didn't know what I was doing. An interesting connection that will never be forgotten. Tell me your memories of Dot Hack if you have any. What was your entry point to the series? Did you begin with Dot Hack Sign like I did, or did you begin with the games? I'd be interested to know where you land on that spectrum. And tell me your happiest memories of this series, if you have any. And tell me what you think about the fact that the series just seems to be a distant memory at this point. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.